everyone, this is Rowena May Babor and I am going to continue my report about the characteristics of ancient literature. These would be my specific topics. First, the Old Kingdom literature. Second, the Middle Kingdom literature. Third, the New Kingdom literature. Learning objectives. Effective. Justify the types of Egyptian literary as products of its history. Skill. Evaluate selected Egyptian literary works. Knowledge. Identify Egyptian literary works. Most Egyptian literature was used in writing papyrus and ceramics, usually in hieroglyphics or hieratic scripts. Although hieratic and later Demotic and Coptic scripts became the common writing system and educated and literate, hieroglyphics remained in use throughout Egypt's history for monumental structures during the Christian period. The differences between Demotic and hieratic. So the word hieroglyph literary means sacred carvings, or it is used to write that language from its development in the 3rd millennium BC until the rise of Demotic in the mid-1st millennium BC. While Demotic everyone is the ancient Egyptian script derived from northern France of hieratic use in the Nile Delta, and the stage of the Egyptian language written in this script. Demotic also is a Greek word meaning popular script, was in general used for the daily requirements of the society. So we are now on the Old Kingdom literature. The offering lists and autobiographies, though not considered literature, are the first example of the Egyptian writing system in action. The offering list was a simple instruction known to the Egyptian as the Hittite news, or a boon given by the king. So I will read to you the one of the tale that belongs to the Old Kingdom literature. The story goes this way. Once upon a time, a pharaoh went towards the temple of the good Pita. His counselors and servants accompanied him. It chanced that he paid a visit to the villa of the chief scribe, behind which there was a garden with a stately summer house and a broad artificial lake. Among those who followed Pharaoh was a handsome youth, and the scribe's wife beheld him with love. Soon afterwards, she went gifts unto him, and they had secret meetings. They spent a day in the summer house and feasted there, and in the evening, the youth bathed in the lake. The chief butler then went to his master the scribe and informed him what had come to pass. The scribe bade the servant to bring a certain magic box, and when he received it, he made a small wax crocodile, over which he muttered a spell. He placed it in the hands of the butler, saying, "Cast this image into the lake behind the youth when next he bathes himself." On other day, when the scribe dwelt with Pharaoh, the lovers were together in the summer house, and at eventide the youth went into the lake. The butler stole through the garden, and still he cast into the water the image wax, which was immediately given life. It became a great crocodile that seized the youth suddenly and took him away. 7 days passed, and then the scribe spoke to the pharaoh regarding the wonder which had been done, and made request that his majesty should accompany him to his villa. The pharaoh did so, and when they both stood beside the lake in the garden, the scribe spoke magic words, bidding the crocodile to appear. As he commanded, so did it do. The great reptile came out of the water, carrying the youth in its jaws. The scribe said, "Lo, it shall do whatever I command to be done," said the pharaoh. Bid the crocodile to return at once to the lake. Ere he did that, the scribe touched it, and immediately it became a small image of wax again. The pharaoh was filled with wonder, and the scribe related unto him all that had happened. While the youth stood waiting, said his majesty unto the crocodile, "Seize the wrongdoer." The wax image was again given life, and, clutching the youth, leaped into the lake and disappeared. Nor was it ever seen after that. Then Pharaoh gave command that the wife of the scribe should be seized. On the north side of the house, she was bound to a stake and burnt alive, and what remained of her was thrown into the Nile. The analysis of the story entitled The Wax Crocodile. Modern Egyptologists like Verena Lepper and Miriam Lechton deny this view and argue that Seth and Ehrman may have just failed to see the profundity of Dutch novels. They hold that the story of Olbaner describes a classical case of adultery through the wife and a typical sort of punishment for that during the Old Kingdom, or in the case, it is the death penalty. Furthermore, it throws a positive light on the personality of King Nevka. The king is depicted as a strict but lawful judge. He punishes mischief and unethical behavior. In this case, the betrayal of Olbaner's wife. Additionally, Lipper and Lechem point to multiple similar but somewhat later ancient Egyptian writings in which magicians perform very similar magic tricks. According to the Egyptologists, their stories are obviously inspired by the tale of Olbaner, and since they show the same manner of speaking and equal picking up of quaint phrases as the Westcar papers does, Lipper and Lechem hold that Olbaner and the other wise men from the same papyrus must have been known to Egyptian authors for a long time. Donald Angus Mackenzie was the writer of the story entitled The Wax Crocodile. He is a professor of sociology at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. His work constitutes a crucial contribution to the field of science and technology studies. He has also developed research in the field of social studies of humanity. So the next topic, everyone, is about the Middle Kingdom literature. The Middle Kingdom literature is considered the classical age of Egyptian literature. During this time, the script known as the Middle Egyptian was created, considered the highest form of hieroglyphics and other artifacts in museums in the present day. The eloquent peasant is one of the tales during the Middle Kingdom period. The story begins with a poor peasant, Kon Anuk, traveling to market with his donkeys heavily laden goods to exchange for supplies for his family. While Kon Anuk was en route, Nimtainak, a vassal of the high steward Renzi, notices the peasant approaching his lands and devises a scheme to steal Kon Anuk's donkeys and supplies. Nimtainak tricks the peasant by placing a cloth on the narrow public path, where one side was bordered by the river and the other side were the private fields of Nimtainak. His placing of the cloth on the path forces the peasant to either trample the cloth, step into the water, or take his donkeys over. As Kon Anuk is appealing to Nimtainak's sense of reason in blocking his path with the cloth, one of Kon Anuk's donkeys eats a bite of barley, and Nimtainak uses this as a justification to take Anuk's donkeys and goods. When Kon Anuk complains this punishment is unfair, Nimtainak beats him. Kon Anuk cries for justice, and Nimtainak threatens the peasant with death if he dares to complain. Kon Anuk does not accept this injustice and continues to appeal to Nimtainak for 10 days. Failing to receive justice from Nimtainak, Kon Anuk seeks out the high steward, the noble Renzi son of Meru, and presents his case. Renzi brings the peasant case of the magistrates, who dismiss the case as merely being a matter of a peasant at odds with a landowner, but Renzi does not relay this information to the peasant. Renzi brings the story of the wronged peasant before the Pharaoh, Nebkawi, who is believed to be Nebkawi Keiti, telling him how elegantly the peasant speaks. Intrigued by the report of a peasant who speaks so elegantly, the Pharaoh instructs Renzi to not respond to the peasant's pleas, so that the peasant would continue to make his elegant speeches and they could be written down for the Pharaoh. The Pharaoh orders Renzi to feed the peasant and his family while the peasant continues to plead his case, further instructing Renzi. For 9 days, Kon Anuk complimented the high steward Renzi and begged for justice. After 9 days of speeches, Kon Anuk threatened suicide. After sensing that he was being ignored, Kon Anuk insulted Renzi and was punished with a beating. After one last speech, the discouraged peasant left, but Renzi sent for him and ordered him to return. But rather than being punished for his insolence, the peasant was given justice. Renzi, after reading Kon Anuk's last speech, was impressed and ordered the donkeys and the goods to be returned to Kon Anuk and the peasant to be compensated with all the property of Nimtainak, making Nimtainak as poor as Kon Anuk had been. Characters of the story entitled The Eloquent Peasant. First, Kon Anuk. The poor peasant lives with his wife Mary and their children in an oasis around the Nile Delta in Egypt. He goes on a journey taking with him his donkeys and variety of goods to market, so so he can bring food and supplies back to his family. Nin Tainak here is a greedy vassal to the high steward Renzi. Nin Tainak notices the peasant Kon Anok supply laden donkeys and devises a trap that will provide him with a reason for taking Kon Anok's donkeys and goods. The third character is Renzi, son of Mary. The noble Renzi, son of Mary, is the high steward of Arua Nibkauri. The peasant Kon Anok appeals to Renzi when he does not receive justice from Nin Tainak. The last character is Nibkauri. He is His Majesty of the dual King Nibkauri. The Justified. The Justified is a standard epithet of the deceased. Nibkauri is a king of the 10th dynasty of Heracleopolis. He is a pharaoh or a king of Egypt during the first intermediate period. The theme of the story entitled The Eloquent Peasant. Ma'at is the ancient Egyptian law based on the idea of harmony and balance and allows for the social hierarchy to be prevalent in citizens' everyday lives. This theme is present throughout the poem, especially in Kon Anok's speeches about what justice means to his situation. Ma'at is also exemplified in the courts of the story because justice and social hierarchy is fully dependent on the judge and how he interprets Ma'at in relation to the trials. Lauren R. Fisher is the writer of the story entitled The Eloquent Peasant. He is a professor of sociology at the University of Edinburgh, Scotland. His work constitutes a crucial contribution to the field of science and technology studies. He has also developed a research in the field of social studies of finance and was fascinated by ancient East Mediterranean history, and that meant that he would have to learn many languages. After graduating from the University of Oregon, he studied Hebrew and Aramaic with Professor P.W. Nakarai at Butler University for 3 years and received a M.A. The last topic about the New Kingdom literature. During this era, rule in Egypt was divided between the foreign kings of the Hyksos in Lower Egypt at Avaris Egyptian, rule in Thebes in Upper Egypt, and off-control reaches of Upper Egypt by the Nubians. This summary of the tale of two brothers is belonged to the New Kingdom literature. So Bata served his elder brother Anubis like a son. Bata had prodigious strength and the power to understand animals. One day, as they were plowing, Anubis sent Bata back to the house for more seed. The wife was smitten with mighty Bata and tried to seduce him, only to be rejected. You are like a mother to me, and your husband like a father. Virtuous to a fault, he promised not to tell her shame. But she faked a betting or swallowing rancid fat to induce vomiting. And when Anubis returned, she told him that Bata had raped her. So Anubis waits in ambush in the stable, but the lead cow warns Bata and he flees. Riharakti intervenes and draws a river full of crocodiles between Bata and his pursuer. From the far side of the river, Bata protests his innocence, and to prove his claim, he calls Ri to witness and castrates himself, or penis and all casting the genitals into the river. Anubis is thus convinced of his innocence. Thereupon, Bata awakens and seems to depart this life, journeying to the valley of the Tyne, telling his brother that he must come to resurrect him when a sign appears. When Anubis finds that beer ferments in his cup, he will know that Bata has perished and he must go to save him. For Bata will take out his heart and lodge it in the pine flower. At the top of the tree, when his sign comes to him, Anubis must go and find the heart and restore it to life in a basin of water. Anubis returns home, kills his wife, and gives her carcass of the dogs. Bata in the valley of the pine is blessed by the Ennead. On order of Rikana fashions for Bata a wife of supreme beauty. The ichor of every god is in her, but it is not a happy match, for she sat in the house while he spent the days hunting desert game. He warned her not to go outside, lest the sea snatch you. I cannot rescue you, because I am a woman like you. Nonetheless, she ventures out. The tide surges around her and captures a trace of her hair, or that snagged out the pine. And the sea then cries the trees back to Egypt. There the fragrance of the trees soup permeates. Farua learns from his scribes that his trees belongs to a daughter of Riharakti in one is the acre of every god. So he sends out envoys to search for her. She is found in the valley of the pine and brought back to Egypt. There she delights the king and demands that he send soldiers to cut them the great pine, or wherein is the heart of Bata. The next day, when Anubis takes his barley beer, it ferments in his cup. He takes wine and its source. So recognizing the sign, he sets out for the valley of the pine. There he finds Bata's body and searches 3 years for the heart. When he has nearly given up, he finds it, puts in a basin of water, and as the heart soaks the water, the body of Bata takes life and twitches. Anubis gives him the basin to drink, and his heart is restored. The two brothers are reunited. Then Bata's plan, they journeys to Egypt. Bata himself disguised as a great bull, Anubis riding on his back. Farua is impressed and honors Anubis. But Bata the bull reveals himself to the wife, or now wife of Farua, and she contrives to have him slaughtered by tricking Farua into a promise. She demands, "Let me eat the liver of this bull." At his slaughter, 2 drops of the blood soak into the earth at the doorpost of the palace, and there 2 great persea trees spring up. When on either side, again Bata, now in the persea tree, reveals himself to the treasurer's wife, and again she tricks Farua into promising, now to cut down the trees and make furniture for her. When the trees are filled, a splinter of the wood flies off and lodges in her mouth, and she becomes pregnant from it. Farua dotes upon the child as his son, or he rises to be crowned prince. When Farua dies, the new Farua, Bata triumphant, condemns the treasurer's wife and mother. He elevates Anubis to crown prince, and after his reign of 30 years, at Bata's death, Anubis succeeds him. The context and theme of the story entitled The Tale of Two Brothers. The tale of two brothers that are significant to ancient Egyptian culture. One of these is kingship. The second half of the tale deals largely with Egyptian ideas of kingship and the connection between divinity and the Farua. That Bata's wife ultimately ends up pregnant with him is a reference that duality of the role of woman in pharaonic succession. The roles of wife and mother were often simultaneous. Also, the divine aspect of his wife's creation could be seen to serve as legitimacy for the kingship of Bata, especially since he was not actually the child of the Farua. Beyond this, Bata's closeness with the Aeneid in the middle of the story also serves to legitimize his rule. The gods bestow divine favor upon Bata in his time of need. Wilhelm Grimm here is the writer of The Tale of Two Brothers. Was born in February 1786 in Hanau, in Hesse-Kassel. In 1803, he started studying law at the University of Marburg, 1 year after his brother Jacob started there. The two brothers spent their entire lives close together. In their school days, they had 1 bed and 1 table in common. As students, they had 2 beds and 2 tables in the same room. In 1825, 39-year-old Wilhelm married pharmacist's daughter, Henriette Dorothea Wild, also known as Dorchen. Jacob Grimm, his brother, is also known as Ludwig Karl, was a German linguist, philologist, jurist, and folklorist. He is known as the discoverer of Grimm's law of linguistics, the co-author of the monumental glitches Wörterbuch, the author of the Austrian mythology, and the editor of Grimm's fairy tales. He was the older brother of Wilhelm Grimm, of the literary duo, the brothers Grimm.